Okay, I changed the lighting today, so I'm not quite sure. This will do. This will do. So very, very warm welcome, everybody. And where do we start? Oh, yeah. One thing is, yeah, change of program. So I'm enjoying these 6 paramita teachings, and we're in Diligence just now. And I worked out that with the program we've got, because we've still got meditation and prajna paramita to go. And so I was going to have to rush Diligence. That's uncomfortable, because when you think what Diligence is about, one aspect of it is that you don't fluff things, rush things. And I'm finding it very useful for myself. And so I've decided to add 2 more sessions so that we're comfortable as we go through these paramita teachings. It's also because they contain a lot of practical, helpful information. The 2 weekends, which were going to be about the Kagyu lineage, one about the path of liberation, one about the path of skillful means, they'll be pushed back to after the series of teachings on dying as best one can. So they're still coming. But when we did the prayer to Vajradhara, we did touch on that topic a bit. So I feel it's much better we carry on with the paramitas. So I hope that's okay with you. And you'll be getting something from Zoom about that automatically soon. And then Katie says hello to everybody. She's not with us today. She's away for the weekend on a training course. So let's start. Let's start with, excellent motivation. And we make a big mind, which means an inclusive mind. We try and include as many sentient beings as we can. And in particular, the real ones, the ones we've experienced, because otherwise it's just a sort of an abstract idea, something we've read about or heard about, sentient beings. So the ones we've met are precious beyond belief. I always think cats and dogs are wonderful for that, because if you ever had a cat or a dog, it's a whole initiation into the cat world or the dog world. And you start to realize just what it's like to be a cat or to be a dog or whatever your pet is. So the real sentient beings we have met that are in our lives just help us understand the variety of life, consciousness, awareness. So we include, and then we include everybody with as much love as we can. So whatever love we've felt most in our lives for anybody, human or animal, then we try and feel that for everybody. And especially for the ones who've not been kind to us, the ones who've hurt us. This is our Bodhisattva journey. Equanimity is a funny thing. It's not today's topic, but it comes through all levels of Buddhist teachings. We want to achieve equanimity. Equa means the same, of nimity, anima, the mind, a sameness of mind for all sentient beings. But that's not kind of a leveling down of like everybody neutral. It means we will love everybody as much as we've ever loved anybody. It's like bringing our love for every being up to a maximum. And I don't think the word equanimity sometimes, it makes me think of a steamroller going over a surface and kind of leveling it, rather than lifting everything up to a highest, purest level. So we include, and we do that lovingly. And then especially related to our diligence teachings, we do it with a happy mind, because we have dharma. Dharma is the only thing that lasts. Everything else comes and goes. Everyone else comes and goes. Life comes and goes. Dharma is forever. Thank you. Sonje chodan soje chonam la jancho badon dane chapsunche. Dagi jinso jipe sanam ji rola penchera sonje dro parasho. Sonje chodan soje chonam la jancho badon dane chapsunche. Dagi jinso jipe sanam ji rola penchera sonje dro parasho. Sonje chodan soje chonam la jancho badon dane chapsunche. Dagi jinso jipe sanam ji rola penchera sonje dro parasho. Semchen tamche dewa dang dewe jodang dem parajoche. Dongal dang dongal je jodang trawara joche. Dongal mepe dewa tampa dang men trawara joche. Nyeren chadan netan tralwe tanyong chempola ne parajoche. Yata shame shamavati shamita sha chum om kurim marazite karata geore tajuvati olayane bishuddhani male malabana ye kukure kaka grase grasana om muki paramugi amuki shamitane sawa graha bandana ne nikrita sawa pava pravadina vimukta marapasha Satta pita buddha mudra anugatita savamari butsarita parishuddhi vega santu savamara kama. Palen sawe lama rinpoche dagye chawara pende denshola. Kadrin champo gone jezonte Kuson toje madrop sandu sol. So, what happened there? Oh, well. Last week we started this paramita of diligence, and we saw the essence is to take delight in dharma. There are many details, many areas of application, as we saw already last week. As we go on today, I'll try to go quickly through some of the main points of the classical teachings on the paramita of diligence. Otherwise, I get the sack, I lose my job. But also one thing I think that's helpful is kind of an insight into what's going on, and in particular, why diligence is even deeper and even harder than forbearance. Because I think diligence could seem to be not that special, not that deep, not that complicated for people. A lot of people think, associate it with like hard work, buckling down to the task, and that kind of thing. So it has many aspects, but why it is deep? Well, let's look at that. First, let's step back and look at an order of priorities in the Buddha's teaching. And so then these days in our own teachers' teachings, our own gurus' teachings to us, there definitely is an order of priorities. First and foremost, we must stop the harm. So the basic teachings of Dharma that all the different schools have, we call them sometimes Shravaka or Hinayana teachings. They're the foundation, they are the basis for all Dharma, is about stopping the harm. And there's no point carrying on to do wonderful things and meditate and all of that if we are still harming ourselves and harming others. It's a teacher's job, it's a guru's job to help you stop damaging yourself and to stop doing anything that's damaging those around you in your life. And so one of my wonderful teachers, the first Kalu Rinpoche, used to say, this is like the saucer of a teacup. Now, in this image, you need to know what a Tibetan teacup looks like. It's not quite like an English set of chinaware. The saucer is very important, and it's got a hollow in the middle, like our saucers do, but a deeper hollow, because the cup is very pointed. It needs to sit inside the saucer, the base, otherwise it will topple over. And the cup is very precious. Often some of the nice ones, they're made of jade and so on. So we're thinking of that kind of cup. So the saucer, the basis, is what holds anything that follows. So we must stop harming ourselves and others. Then the next priority, if that's being put in place, is how to benefit ourselves, how to make this life worthwhile by improving, bringing in good qualities. That's like a teacup. And also that teacup is like the third stage of priority. Once we are not harming ourselves and others, and once we are really actively bringing good qualities into ourselves, then that makes us a richer source to help others. Rushing out to help others when we don't have much to offer, you can cause a lot of harm and waste a lot of time. In Dharma terms, we need stability before we help others. We need Dharma to be stable and trusted. We don't need to be wobbly ourselves in Dharma if we're going to help others with Dharma. And once we understand what goes on with our own Dharma training, very often that is more important than worldly help for others. Of course, if somebody is hungry and we can feed them, if somebody needs comfort and we can comfort them, we should do it. We saw that in the Paramita of generosity. But in a longer term view, your time is better invested making you a reliable, rich source of strength for others before going out there and helping them. And we saw last week in Diligence, when it talked about the armor-like diligence, where it says, from now on until I reach the heart of enlightenment, I will never take off this attitude, this bodhisattva attitude. Then we need to be strong, and be strong enough to be strong from now on forever, before we invest deeply in helping others. It's not a cop-out, it's an intelligent choice, and it's very much related to today's deeper understanding of diligence, I hope. So this bringing qualities into oneself and helping others, the positive side. The saucer, stopping the harm. The positive side, bringing benefit to oneself and others, is like the teacup. But then, what Kalu Rinpoche added to that, is not in today's teaching, is the tea itself, which is what the saucer and the cup's all about, because otherwise it's just an ornament, is the Vajrayana method, whereby we can mobilize our mind and parts of our mind that other traditions of Buddhism don't mobilize, like the imagination, in order to help ourselves quite radically. So anyway, there is an order. Now, if we think of that order in terms of the paramita that we're studying, then forbearance paramita is very much about stopping the harm. Remember the definition, you can cope with anything. And especially, and then cope with anything in the sense that your mind is no longer upset. So there we're dealing with the damage that comes from a mind which is upset or can be upset. You know, I remember when we did the teachings on that, Akon Rinpoche saying, if you don't have the forbearance, you're like somebody carrying around a bomb. It's not exploded yet, but given the right circumstances, it could. I don't know if any of you saw a film, gosh, it goes back now, it must have been 30 years ago. It's a big classic about a guy who has to drive a truck full of TNT across the mountains somewhere. You come out of that film a nervous wreck because there's so many, you know, no, nitroglycerin, I think it must have been. Something that explodes very easily. I remember in one of my lab jobs in between school and college, we got bored and we used to make nitroglycerin in the test tubes and then drop a drop out the window. And as soon as it hits the ground, it makes like a firework, big bang. So anyway, we're like somebody carrying a bomb as long as we can be upset. It can wreck our own Dharma practice because sometimes there are big upsets, especially in Vajrayana, which we're not talking about today officially, but because it's so powerful, it's a bit like a relationship between a therapist and a patient. There comes a point when sometimes the patient kicks back and really rejects the therapist and projects a lot of stuff onto the therapist. So people can project onto their gurus, onto the whole system, and disappear off the face of the Dharma world for quite a while. They can damage themselves and they can damage others. So forbearance is very much wonderful teachings about how bodhisattvas work with their mind so that bit by bit, nothing can upset them. That's dealing with the damage. But when we come to diligence, then we're looking more at the positive side, the joy of Dharma, and a deeper perspective, which will help with forbearance, but you might not be able to get until you've practiced forbearance. I hope this makes some sense. There's a reason, there's an order to these paramitas. In Vajrayana, which we're not talking about today officially because we're in the Mahayana teachings on the paramitas, in Vajrayana and in our Kagyu tradition, faith and trust is very important. And when we look at the teachings on forbearance, and then especially now on diligence, we are trusting something that basically we cannot test. The Buddha's teachings on reincarnation, karma, cause and effect. You can't. You can pay a few $1 million and go up sort of into space, not really space, but the top of the atmosphere if you've got that much money. But you can't pay any amount of money and pop into the future to see what you're going to become. Some people I know, quite a lot of people have got some inclination, sometimes some memory of past lives. So that's different. Sometimes those memories are enough to make people fairly convinced that they've had past lives. But this context of this life is just one amongst thousands. And the Dharma is so important because it's just the way everything works. It's not Buddhism. It's nothing to do with some religion on planet Earth between the years so and so and so and so. It's about the way the whole cosmos works. Because the whole cosmos is mind. How mind works. There's nothing other than that. And we're on this long journey of awakening to that. And we're asleep right now. But we can't go and check it out. We can't go and borrow the Buddha's eyes for 10 minutes and see the world as the Buddha sees it, where it's so blooming obvious. We can't see our own life through Karmapa's eyes, through Buddha's eyes, where who we are, what we're going through, our fixed ideas, our prejudices, our karma we carry, is obvious. We are pickled inside it. We're like a pickle in a jar. And I think of all the pickles, I don't know if you know this British pickle called piccalilli, which is pickled in mustard, but there it's opaque. So it's not like a pickled onion where you're at least in transparent vinegar. You're a bit of pickled cauliflower inside thick mustard. So we are in this life. And part of diligence is the teacher handing over to you the responsibility to sort yourself out. So it's like weaning a baby. You know, we can attend teachings, we can read books, our intellect can be satisfied, but diligence on our part of it is to buckle down, to think even deeper, to reflect, so that we are no longer hearing messages from the outside, but the obvious truth of what we're hearing about is slowly dawning in ourselves. So when the reality of karma, cause and effect, one thing, reincarnation, karma, cause and effect, and our localization in this life, that has to wake up. Second thing that has to wake up, the truth of our Buddha nature. How can such a thing be true? How can I be Buddha? And so on. So we have to kind of wake up to that. So diligence gives us joy, because this message of long-term Dharma is important, this life is not that important, the things of this life not that important, our dreams for future lives not that important, but Dharma is important, fights against everything that our ego wants. And I've said it before, but it's so true. Ego is a survivor. It survived until now. If we believe these teachings on Dharma, karma, cause and effect, we've not just been going 5 lives or 10 lives or 100 lives or 1,000 lives. Somehow, the resistance to letting go of self-imaging, self-needs, fights with other people because we've got a self and so on, has been surviving and fighting Dharma since time immemorial. And so what we are doing with diligence is finding such a joy of Dharma that we have a brilliant tool of light to fight this age-old trickery of ego. The words are easy. The reality is not easy. And that's what we admire in our true teachers, because they have and they embody this union with Dharma. They are Dharma. And they're not going around happy clappy Buddhists saying, whoopee, Dharma, I have the Dharma joy. But what it means is their joy doesn't depend on worldly things. A nice ice cream or a trip to see the northern lights near the North Pole. Their joy doesn't depend on doesn't depend on other people, doesn't depend on what's going on in the world, doesn't depend on our health. The joy is coming from Dharma, and Dharma means loving wisdom. So this is why we admire them. This is why they have something to give to us. So I wanted to say those few words about, in general, about why diligence is deep, because that joy is not easy to find. And what comes to my mind is a sort of sudden, maybe it's just me, but an idea of kind of grumpiness, whereby, oh yes, true, yeah, what they all say, Dharma's true, but I do like to go to movies, and something inside us isn't thinking, oh, whoopee, I can go and sit on a cushion. Last week, I think there was it your question? Yeah. Anyway, there was a question about this resistance to sitting on a meditation cushion, that kind of invisible force shield around a meditation cushion that keeps one away, even though once you actually do it, you feel so happy you did it, and there's a benefit. So anyway, we need to overcome that. So Buddha gives us the means. These are in the teachings on diligence. It means the means whereby if we apply them and understand them, we can find this joy of Dharma, which will be so deeply transformative and helpful. So here, like I said, part of diligence is for you to read the modules that I sent you, the study modules, and not just read them, and not just think, oh, I've got the information there, the backup, but to actually go through them. It's not for me, I don't work on commission. Every time you read one of the modules, I don't get brownie points from heaven. It's for you. So if you read the relevant module, then go back, think about it deeply, each point if you've got the time. What does this really mean? First thing, what's really going on now? If I was back there in Sarnath, sitting at the Buddha's feet, and Buddha was telling me this, what would Buddha want me to understand? And then once we've spent good time with the teaching words that way, then the next step is now, how is this particularly relevant to my life? So some teachings might not be. There's so many teachings. They're not all for everybody. And it's just ridiculous these days. I mean, these days, stuff that was only given one-on-one when the time was right, from a teacher to a disciple, it's all online. And you've got everything, Mahamudra, Dzogchen, you've got Tummo practices, and there's just so much stuff. So much stuff that, according to my teachers, didn't ought to be available, but it is available. So we think, is this teaching relevant for me? Sometimes at first you might think, no. Think twice, maybe. Is there sometimes something in me that doesn't really want to see these teachings because they're a bit too painful? So anyway, but if it's not for you, fine. But if it is for you, then think, in the light of this what's being said? Is there some way I can help myself? So anyway, I do hope you will study each section about diligence. And today I just want to go through the main ones. So we saw that diligence is this joy of dharma, and that diligence is the remedy for wasting our precious time. So it's why I talked about the perspective. You know, we grew up from being a child. When you're a baby and then an infant and so on, you've got all of life ahead of you. And we're gradually being initiated into life as it is. And we take on that reality. We don't have any sense of urgency. Unless our parents are Buddhist, then we've not got an idea of, oh, this is just one tiny life, dear. In very, very many, you're here for a brief moment. And but even then, until you're 21 or 22, your prefrontal cortex isn't developed to take on logical arguments. It's more your limbic system that is driving you. You know, it's why teenagers are teenagers and they're a bit complicated. It's because the different parts of the front of the brain that use the power of reason and determination and so on. So we've grown up, and especially those youngest years when we are so deeply formed. And so it takes a lot of work to really get this perspective, to really think of this life and its circumstances and the people as being just something passing. It's like being imagine you're on a wonderful journey and you're spending the night in a hotel. But then the hotel's got a one-armed bandit and you start getting into it. And so you put some coins in and you put more coins in. And by the time the evening's finished, all of your budget for the rest of the journey has gone in the one-armed bandit. And then you're a bit stuck. If you're lucky, you can get back home, but you certainly can't complete your journey. We've got karmic, wonderful capital that made us human beings, with the intelligence we've got and the encounters we've got with Dharma, with lamas, with teachers, each in our own way. It won't last forever. It's a very, very rare opportunity. So with diligence, we realize that, and we don't want to waste time. So we see that diligence is the opposite to wasting time. And then last week I did touch on it briefly because I was still under this pressure of finishing the paramitas quickly. But we saw 3 ways of wasting time. And the first one was idleness. Now, our teachings come from a few thousand years ago, and they were continued to be taught in Tibet, which was a rural, isolated society, as you know. People weren't busy like they are. Sometimes of the year, of course, harvest time and this time, they'd be busy. People had time on their hands. These days, we don't. These days, our lives are busy. And I remember that first Kalu Rinpoche saying, because he was old, you know, he'd spent most of his life in Tibet. Then he came out first to experience India and then to the West. And he changed some of the Chinrezig practice explanations because of this with the 6 realms. He says the human realm is characterized by 2 things which go together, desire and busyness. Because we desire so much that in order to get it and keep it and so on and make it happen, we are so busy. And he said, this is the suffering of being human. And so time wasting in the old days, in this first aspect, through sheer laziness, was just sleeping a lot, hanging around a lot, But then there's one story, Milarepa and Rai-Chungpa, that's quite interesting. It's a detour, but stories are nice, aren't they? So I don't know if you've read this, but Rai-Chungpa, he went to India. He became a big shot, and he got transmissions of many teachings. He was a brilliant mind. He was a very, very attractive personality, and so he learned quite a bit about philosophy. He learned quite a lot of what can we call them, magical techniques. And so he'd already become a somebody in his own right under the great Guru Tipupa in India and others. So then when he came back to Tibet and he met Milarepa, he didn't really have as much respect as he ought to have had for Milarepa. Milarepa had set him on the path and so on, but maybe inside he felt we're equals, or no, I've got a lot of love for my old Lama who set me on, this simple old man who, and so on. So Milarepa sends him off at one point to get some firewood so they can cook some food. And Rai-Chungpa goes off and he starts looking at goats. And then there's something strange, because the goats are reproducing and giving birth and making baby goats who are reproducing and giving birth in front of his eyes. Now, normally it doesn't happen immediately like that. So he's there fascinated. And then all of a sudden he remembers, because it's getting dark, got to get back, got firewood. And he gets back and he finds that in the meantime, Milarepa's burnt all of his texts about magic and all the stuff that Milarepa didn't deem necessary for him. So anyway, it's a long story, but what does he do? He gets fascinated by something. He gets fascinated. So we can just be lazy and sleep a lot, but we can also spend a lot of time getting fascinated. And that can lead us into all sorts of, let's say, lesser directions. When you understand karma a bit more, we see how the options we have with our own karma are changing all the time. It's like railway lines, points, changing direction. So Trangpa Rinpoche used to tell a story about somebody in a 3-year retreat. They had a kind of a window with rough stones. In between the stones, there was, of course, dirt. And one day a bird had come and crapped on the window, but it had a seed in its crap. And nobody was cleaning the windowsill, so it stayed there for a while. And the seed started growing into a flower. And the meditator who was sitting there meditating 18 hours a day becomes fascinated by seeing this flower growing. And when it actually becomes a full flower, he very carefully collected the seeds and then planted them in the dirt in the cracks. And then as the next year of his retreat went by, then he had a whole window full of flowers growing. The conclusion, Trangpa Rinpoche said, is when he left the retreat, he became a horticulturalist or whatever that was in Tibet. He became somebody who was growing things. And so his karma changed from being a retreater to something else through his fascination. Milarepa caught Rai-Chungpa by knowing he still had this power to be fascinated by what's happening through his senses. One of the ways we can waste time under the heading of laziness is fascination. And these days, internet, for all of its benefits, because we couldn't have this talk without it, is also an amazing time waster. The amount of interesting, useless stuff that's on internet is endless. Is endless. I confess, I do it. This morning over breakfast, we were talking about the man who flew his aeroplane through Tower Bridge. And then Katia said, oh yeah, but there was a man in France who flew a biplane through the Arc de Triomphe. Now that is really amazing. When you see the photo of it, he had about this much clearance either side. So it's interesting, it's fascinating that somebody had the nerve to do that. It's a total waste of time. We were chewing our breakfast, so I suppose it's okay. But if we are sincere Buddhists and we want to give our time to practice, then these days there are so many fascinating distractions that in this sense simply count as wasting time through laziness. Laziness means you're not applying dharma because you don't value it enough. This is the basic message. Laziness means you're not applying dharma because you don't understand enough its value. One bit of you does. You put it as the most noble, highest thing in your mind. We take refuge in it. But actually in our habits of what we're doing with our thoughts and our mind from second to second, the penny hasn't dropped. So time wasting as idleness. This is why I say you need to deep think. I need to deep think about how we do that and apply it. And then time wasting as pusillanimity, where we have, that means a weak mind, pusil and anima. So we've got a weak mind. In this sense, a weak mind can be applied to strong-minded people. They've got strong samsaric minds, but the Dharma mind is weak, which means that we don't have self-love. That's how it will be expressed these days. And we don't have self-esteem. The self-love and the self-esteem come primarily through Buddha nature teachings. One of our greatest teachers, if not the greatest these days in our own lineage, Bodhicitta, he says again and again, he's made it such a theme for, he gives it, when he's invited to give a talk on anything, you listen to those talks always. He tells people your mind is primordially Buddha. It is good, it is pure, it is wise, it has everything. This is the real you. Again and again and again. And we need to let those we need to learn those teachings and to let them sink in. Because it's so hard to believe. It's okay to believe it intellectually. I think we can kind of get that. And I can imagine, I'm thinking of one of my more cynical friends who might say, yeah, sure, yeah, we're Buddha, yeah, right, one day. But right now, you are Buddha. That you have the most wonderful possibility to open up that Buddha-ness inside you. Very, very hard to deeply believe, to live your life as though that's the case. This is what it means. So then we need to go a bit deeper into that, because there are a lot of teachings that we need to put together, especially in the context of this bodhisattva journey, bodhicitta, and the armor-like diligence of attitude. We need to understand this question of self and no self better. Ultimately, you have no self, no personal self, no persona. Ultimately, you have an identity, it's Buddha. That's the same for all of us. It's not as though your no self means you're identityless. You're just kind of zombied. I have no self, and there's nothing there. It means we all have the same identity. It's beautiful. That word identity is like in identical. We have an identical identity. We don't have a personal persona, which it feels like we do. I feel like me, different from you. When I look at you on the screen, I really don't feel like you. I love you. I think you're wonderful. But I think you feel like you too, and you don't feel like Ken Holmes. You know, we feel like me. So what all of that's saying is, what I'm trying to say through this is, what we're doing on our Bodhisattva journey is gradually shifting this story of me to the Bodhisattva me. We're not saying no me. We're making a noble me. So we can talk about self-esteem. You might think when you hear the word self-esteem, what's that got to do with Dharma, when self's a total illusion? Ultimately, it is a total illusion, but ultimately only exists because of relatively. Relatively, you are you just now, and I'm me just now. We're not a fixed story. This is what the Buddha says. We're a changing story, but I'll be my story until I'm enlightened. I'll never be any other stream of consciousness. We won't get mixed up in the bardo, and I'll get your karma, you'll get my karma. When we see Buddha telling his own story of 3 cosmic eons of being him, or her, depending which lives it were, but the personal stream of consciousness doesn't end until enlightenment. So we need to understand that Buddha's teaching on no self is not about being a blank. It means we have no fixed self. So the 3 marks of the Buddha's teaching, who we are is impermanent, is without a fixed self, and it involves suffering. That's what the Buddha teaches. So now we need to understand that the diligence teaching is the joy of knowing that you'll become a better and a better and a better bodhisattva until you're Buddha, the same as all other Buddhas and the same as the essence of all other beings. But it's accepting, it's taking responsibility for our own journey. That's a big part of diligence, taking responsibility for yourself. So when we come to the armor-like diligence of attitude, when we look a bit later on in these detailed teachings, at the details, then we see no matter what happens to us, no matter what happens around us, we will maintain this joy and determination of bodhicitta until we are Buddha. If the whole world goes pear-shaped, the time of dregs, the time of degeneration, if all sorts of things happen to us which are so relatively horrible, we will keep this clear-cut mind of being somebody on a journey over hundreds, thousands of lifetimes. We know where we're going, and we know we're going to do everything, no matter how hard, to go there. So it means taking responsibility for oneself, totally is part of diligence. So we're just looking now at the very beginning of the teachings, what diligence is counteracting. That was the second type of time wasting as low opinion of oneself. You are Buddha, you deserve to be Buddha. And in the Buddha nature teachings, such beautiful examples. One of the most striking is of a poor man who's just got a little hut. You could imagine it in many places where there's great poverty. A hut, maybe one cooking pot, one set of clothes, 2 sets of clothes. Very poor. What he doesn't know is that centuries before, somehow a treasure got buried under the ground, under the hut. So where he sleeps on the soil every night, a meter or two below him, there's something that can completely transform everything. A treasure. He doesn't know it, and so he carries on living his day, going backwards and forwards in poverty. So it says, just imagine that some clairvoyant sprite or spirit comes along and says, oi, mate, what? Do you know there's a treasure underneath your hut? Yeah, sure, pull the other one. No, really and truly. Can you prove it to me? No. But if you dig, then you'll change your life. Yeah, sure. I'm exhausted. I can't eat enough. I don't get enough nourishment. I have to work all day long. Now you want me to start excavating my home, which is the only place I've got to, what's going to happen? He's got a tiny hut. If he's going to dig it, where's he going to live? He's going to have to sort of more or less destroy everything he's got left. It's a wonderful example. But it says somehow the man trusts the sprite's guidance and starts digging. So what happens when you start digging? What do you find? Dirt. And it's tiring, and more dirt, and you might give up at one point. But if you trust the teachings, if you have the vision that the treasure is there, then there'll come that magic moment when your spade goes ding and you hit the treasure chest. And then everything changes. Dig, dig, dig very, very quickly to see what you've got. So this underestimating who we really are and this bodhisattva journey, its importance in our life. Its importance. So then the third way we waste our time, it says, it's a beautiful phrase, involvement with lowly pursuits. And so it defines those mainly through the two main mind poisons, which are either fighting or getting. So through desire, we want this, we want that, we want to better this and a better that, or we'd like to go there, or we can imagine ourselves doing this, enjoying this, having this, rather than imagining ourselves on the way to enlightenment, having mind qualities and strengths to help all beings. So we pursue these selfish desires, which is what they are in the end, or we're fighting because our persona construction and our fixed ideas means we're battling with other people. Fighting, more fighting. It takes up time. Not only does it take up time, it takes up your mind time, your thought time. It can just be so obsessive. Endless imaginary arguments, fights, conflicts with other people. So wasteful. And we're talking about wasting time. So ideally, one goes to retreat, which is why the next paramita is about meditation. So anyway, that's about wasting time. Now, somewhere in there, when we look at fascination and how we can waste our time with interesting but useless stuff, or how we can waste our time by getting more and more, or by fighting for fame and prestige and name and all that kind of thing. If we think of diligence as, okay, then from now on, as many thought moments as I can, dharma thoughts, as many activities as I can, dharma activities, that's fine. But we need to know about rest as well. Because I don't like the idea myself, the language, but actually this diligence, paramita, is very much about efficiency. This life is so precious. How can we make it be used most efficiently? So part of efficiency is knowing when to rest and how much to rest. And diligence doesn't mean that you just push, 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 do everything no matter what until you're broken. So I think I mentioned that last week. But while we're looking at time wasting and laziness and distractions of all sorts, then we need to know that it is good to rest. And sometimes you need to rest a lot if you're really depleted, if you've been ill and so on. It isn't diligence to push yourself stupidly. So trying to know or get some help to know, some external assurance that you're not being lazy, that you're actually being wise, getting yourself back on your feet. So intelligent rest. So let me just check my notes. So all of those three things are about how we can waste time. So now in order not to waste time, we need diligence. And then the Dharma-like diligence we had last week is the essence of it. It's to accept the impermanence of everything in this life, to see yourself in terms of your long bodhisattva journey, and to think, I'm never going to drop this attitude. When we think about this, when we take it away and sit with this idea and deep think and study properly, and then apply it to ourselves and our sort of thoughts moment by moment. Life and technology and nanotechnology and biotechnology has moved on, and it's a strange world we live in. But 20 or so years ago, before all those scarier sides of science, I'd imagined something where you can sort of connect somebody's brain and mind to a screen. So you can actually, yourself or other people could see what you're thinking. Thought by thought, it comes over the loudspeakers, and image by image in your imagination on screen. Not only can you see it, and can other people see it, but it's connected to a supercomputer, which means that every loving thought is logged, every angry thought is logged, every kind of stupid thought is logged, so that at the end of the day, you get a kind of an overall printout that says, all right, out of the 24 hours today, you spent 7.53 minutes with true loving kindness, where you were really like this, or you spent so much like this. So the whole idea of diligence, paramita, is that you're upping your score of the good things every day, what goes on, mainly in your mind. We're looking at diligence is about joy, our mind. So then this attitude, the bodhisattva dharma, means that more and more every day, your mind is in that long-term, many lives, future enlightenment context. And then because of that, you're seeing what's happening to you in this living moment, what other people are saying, what the world is doing, as fuel for that bodhisattva journey. So that instead of reacting in the worldly way, in the ego way, like we've done for lifetimes, now how can this be used as a bodhisattva? So I think last week I mentioned this armor-like attitude. Let me give you a quote. It's from a text called The Collection of Bodhisattva Teachings, and the Buddha's talking to Shariputra. Great blessing in these quotes. Shariputra, wear this inconceivable armor. This, until the furthermost end of samsara, whatever it may be, I will never relax my diligence dedicated to enlightenment. Then not only for your own benefit, but this attitude, this absolute firm conviction of where you're going and what this life is all about, will, once it becomes real, draw other people to you, like we are drawn to our teachers because they have this stability. They have this lack of involvement with this life, the things of this life, and the mentality they produce in ordinary people. So another sutra called the Sutra Teaching the Wearing of the Armor says, Bodhisattvas should wear this armor in order to gather beings to themselves. Since the number of beings is incalculable, then the wearing of this armor should likewise be without limit. So why this is deep, another reason, is because we are totally rephrasing our own identification of ourselves. It's no longer me, Ken. It's me, the Bodhisattva. That goes as deep as you want. It says it's an inconceivable armor. Totally seeing ourselves in a new way, a rebirth. So that's armor-like diligence. It was the first of the three types of diligence. The second type is applied diligence. And we saw last week, it has the three classical areas: dealing with our negativity, building up our own virtue, and then learning to help others. Being diligent with our own poisons. It's very much needed. In our deepening of the paramita of forbearance. It's something we can't put off. We can't do nice things now and deal with our own anger, jealousy, selfishness, greed, ignorance later. That won't work. Later never comes. Tomorrow's the day that never comes. So we need to deal with them. The paramita of forbearance, which I did rush, and which I hope you looked into, and I asked you to many times, with the 9 methods and the 5 methods, gives us ways of dealing with our own mind and the way it gets upset in different ways, self-pity and so on, when life brings what people call misfortune, which for us becomes fortune. So that's in the forbearance teachings. So here with the diligence, we must learn to apply ourselves to our own negativity as much as we can, but because in the sense of intelligent rest, we don't want to have a breakdown. We don't want to put our whole dharma life back by 5-10 years because we pushed ourselves too hard in facing the demons and the poisons that we carry inside us. I think these days it's much easier to talk about these things because we've had the sciences of psychology and psychiatry and so on that have, they're in the world all around us. So diligence means not putting these things off. Now we have a couple of, I think 3 at least, examples that come in the diligence teachings, nice images to keep with you. Well, I don't know if they're nice, but useful. So the first one, it says, how do we practice Dharma? It says, think of somebody where a snake has crawled into their lap. Now, like I ask you to do, I've thought about this one a lot. Think about the example. So in the example, which I suppose comes from a country where they did have snakes, then you throw the snake away as quickly as possible. Let's assume that's the best way. If a snake crawled into your lap, whether it might be better to do nothing and just kind of freeze until it crawls away, I don't know. This is what I'm trying to tell you. But the idea is, wah, a snake, and you just, you know, you don't think, oh, there's a snake. Now that's really interesting. You think there's death. Off you go, you throw it away. So it says act like that with your mind poisons, with your mind poisons. So when we see, oh, I'm getting angry again, I'm getting upset again, or I'm lusting after something or somebody again, here we go, I'm getting jealous again, we don't just think, oh yeah, there I go again. It's a snake, get rid of it. You know, what can I do? This is terrible. Look, I'm a poisoned human being, I ought to be Buddha. I can be a Bodhisattva. Oh, well, I'll do something about that tomorrow. I'm sure something would turn up, like Billy Bunter's checks. It won't. It won't. So that's one image. Another image is as if your hair caught fire. Now, this nearly happened to me last night. I've got a tiny barbecue, which I like to keep the mosquitoes away from supper, so make a lot of smoke. And I bent over it, and I've got quite a lot of this stuff. And so this has happened in the past, singed eyebrows, I've got a lot of those. Jalsa Paramita used to call me Brezhnev. He didn't have much English, but he used to, Brezhnev, and pull my eyebrows. So, you know, I've singed those before, and I've singed their before. So it's quite a relevant example. It says, you know, if your hair catches fire, you don't sit down and analyze it. You don't think, oh, I must do something about this tomorrow. You immediately, you're patting it out, or you're getting water, or you know, whatever it is, you do whatever you can do. So again, when the mind poisons come up, we have wonderful practices in Vajrayana, the practice of chup, the practice of the pek, this special sound, where as soon as something comes up, you just don't give it house room, you don't give it a moment longer, you cut through, stop it. But anyway, so it says, practice like your hair's caught fire. And then a third one is an amazing example where you have a bowl of hot oil balanced on your head, and you have to walk along with the point of a sharp sword on one of your throat arteries. So if anything goes wrong, you're either going to get scalded with boiling oil, or you're going to get the sword in your neck. So how mindful you would be. How mindful you will be. In the moment, in each moment, one after another, step after step. So they help us so it says, I don't know which sutra, but it says, someone observing the discipline of diligence should be as vigilant as a terrified person carrying a pot full of mustard oil while being held at sword point, threatened with death should a drop be spilled. Anyway, now then that's in dealing with our negativity. Then diligence is developing virtue. Then there's 5 areas of that. Let's go through them quickly. One is continuity. And it's the opposite of on-off practice, on-off enthusiasm. And it says there shouldn't be one kalpa where you practice, another one where you don't, 1 year where you practice, another one where you don't. And always with practice, not necessarily meaning formal sitting on your cushion practice, but your mind is in this vision of who you really are and where you're going, and applying dharma to every moment. So we try to make it more continuous. Part of the teachings on this is about diminishing activities in general to useful activities, but then not undertaking something that you may not achieve. So you undertake less and you do things where, as far as you can tell, you can bring it to completion. Completion, there's a continuity where you'll keep on at it, and that will be done. It will be done well, it will be done purely, it will be done in dharma, and that's finished and dedicated. Perfect. Not with half a dozen projects on the boil where none of them may ever get completed, or there'll be delays because one interferes with the other. So I know this is what my own teacher told me. He told me to do less, no need to take on things where you can really complete. So that's number one of the 5. Number 2 is enthusiasm, where we explore our own enthusiasm. Maybe you've never been enthusiastic about anything in your whole life. That will be difficult. That will be difficult. But if you felt enthusiasm for anything, you know the feeling. We try and explore, why was it? And time's rattling by. Gosh, I thought I was giving myself more time, but I'm just rabbiting on more. So anyway, I've got 2 examples for this, which speak to me. One, I think I've used it in my Zoom talks in the Saturdays, but let's do it very quickly. I live near Marseille. In Marseille, we've got migrant workers from Africa. They work really hard. Nearly all their money goes back to their family, their village, and sometimes they're supporting 10, 12, 15 people who are alive, or children get an education back home because of them. They live usually as cheaply as possible. They eat as cheaply as possible. They don't afford entertainment, but their joy is in knowing the benefit that's coming to their family. And they can have enthusiasm for what they do and enjoy what they do, because they know that if they let themselves get down by the terrible conditions they're in, they're not going to make it. So they just think again and again of the benefit back home from what they're doing. So that's an altruistic joy. And so with our Dharma practice, which really and truly, if you believe it, which is what this diligence is about, you believe all these things we can't check out about Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and so much wonderful stuff on our own journey. We believe it, we think of the benefit we're going to bring to so many in the future. You were first hundreds and then thousands. You will do that. And this helps us really work hard on our mind, on our feelings, on our history, on our imagination. Second example is a selfish example, just as good, because Dharma benefits us as well as everybody, is somebody working hard to build their own home. I've known quite a few people who've done this. They work, and they've got somewhere a building plot, and this takes them years, but all the time they don't mind working hard because they've got the image of how that house will be in the end. So that's diligence as enthusiasm. The third one is diligence as being unshakable. And this comes from inside ourselves. And so somehow we are working on the Dharma part of us, so that even when another part of us, which is our own fed-upness, our own anger, whatever we define as mind poisons, comes up, we won't let it deter us. It's this armor-like diligence. We're becoming strong as a mountain, solid as a rock. So even though we recognize what could be taking over our mind and deterring us from our task, we don't let it happen. So that's being unshakable. That's from inside. The next one is diligence as being undeterred And this is not being put off by what happens on the outside. One example, we don't have time for more, but in the last 10 years, there have been a lot of Dharma center scandals. Organizations have crumbled. People's earlier view that all the Dharmas are wonderful, they're all pure, they're all, well, a lot of the myths have been broken. It's good, it's more realistic now. People understand that our lamas are people one hopes further down the path, but they're not all perfect and they're not all pure. And a lot of things happen to organized religion in Tibet that weren't good. All that kind of thing. One can have a lot of disappointment. In Dharma centers change. Dharma centers are run by people. People are people. We can try and help people. It doesn't work, or they're ungrateful. So here we are, same thing. Solid as a rock, strong as a mountain. We keep the Bodhisattva armor, and we don't let ourselves be put off. Of course, we use it for self-examination. Maybe if we weren't doing things very well, we can learn from that, but we're not going to be put off our Dharma journey. Even if we got it all wrong, okay, you'll learn. Hard way. But the Dharma journey continues. And then the last one is, number 5, is humble diligence. And, what's happened? You've practiced forbearance. You're practicing the paramita of diligence. They're wonderful inside you, and you can see how much other people don't have those powers. They're overwhelmed. They get upset. Oh my goodness, these poor people, they get upset still. Imagine that. I don't do that anymore myself. And look, Dharma people practicing Dharma, but it's so hard for them. They don't have the joy. It could go to your head, all of that, because if you're doing it, you will be different from others. And one problem that can creep in, slide in, that you didn't have before, is pride. So humble diligence. Okay, well, I think that's the main thing. Like all the paramitas, it's only paramita. When it's great through the power of jhana and prajna and dedication. Otherwise, it's the virtue of diligence. It's not the paramita of diligence. When it's only the paramita of diligence, when it is pure, through the combined the fusion of compassion and voidness wisdom, the 4 seals of voidness that we did at the beginning of these paramita teachings. Otherwise, it's good. It's the virtue of diligence. It will bring its results in worldly terms, passing results that last as long as their cause determines. So the paramita, which takes you to enlightenment, is when it's great and when it's pure. But the result of diligence paramita in future lives, as long as we exist, life after life, and more and more and more and more, will be that we have many, many skills to help others, many powers. Okay, well, I think that's it for the teaching. And so now we've got a bit of time for, there we are, we're back in the, yeah, it does. I know that it's really very good.
Thank you.
Okay. So I don't think I dedicated earlier on, so let's dedicate. Sonam die tamche zikpani tomneni pedrana pomchine jegana chipala trupayi sipe sole drowa aresho jancho semcho rimpoche majepanam jejoche jepan yampa mepadam kongne kondo pelwaresho. Take good care, everybody. See you soon.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye.
Ken.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye,
Bye-bye.
Ken. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Kim. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Ciao, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Kim.
Thanks,
Thank you
Ken.
so much. It was
Thanks,
wonderful.
Ken. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.